Okay, ladies and gentlemen, yesterday we had opened up with introducing Section 4, Spain and their empire here in the Americas, um, as a way to talk about as to why Spain became such a powerful entity and nation in Europe during the 1500s. And the reality is they had a huge head start because of Columbus's expeditions westward. And the other reason we alluded to was because of the Spanish conquistadors, all right, motivated by gold, glory, and God. Gold, conquistadors wanting to become rich and wealthy, not just for themselves, but also for their home country of Spain. Glory, the idea of becoming famous, not just here in the Western Hemisphere, but back home in Spain and throughout Europe. And also God, because at this time, European culture, a big part of it was religion. So the idea and prospect of converting natives to Christianity was a big proponent into why conquistadors were so eager to conquer many of these tribes here in the West. So for the conquistadors, this is going to play a big part in reasons as to why we talk about them today. So let's get into a few of those conquistadors today. So the first conquistador I'd like to introduce you guys to today is a man by the name of Vasco Núñez de Balboa, who was originally born in Spain in the 1470s and moved to the Caribbean, to the west, to the island of Hispaniola, around the early part of the 1500s. And it was there where he had lived as a farmer, but also was an ambitious person as well. He kind of rose up the ranks within the Spanish military during this time. And as a result, the more of the adventurous side of the definition of a conquistador, a soldier adventurer, led Balboa to explore west of the island of Hispaniola to an area where Columbus was believed to have explored during his last voyage while he was here in the New World around the year of 1501. Where Balboa wound up landing is on the small, or I should say the thin isthmus of what is today present-day country of Panama, all right, which is an isthmus, geographically speaking, is a thin strip of land that connects two larger land masses. So Panama today kind of serves as that country that connects Central America to South America. And ironically, Panama, interesting kind of side note, is the site of this year's World Youth Day, where the Pope will, the Catholic Church will invite all the youth within the church to ascend on a particular country. And this January, World Youth Day will be held in Panama. So Kellenberg, just so you know, will be sending a number of seniors down to Panama for a week to participate in this event that usually takes place every 2 years. So the last World Youth Day, I believe, was in Spain. So this year, it's in Panama. So a lot of seniors, maybe some of your Marinus mentors, are headed there in January. But not to get too off topic, but Balboa and his men will explore this region to where he will wind up on the west coast of Panama. And when he gets to the west coast, as this piece of art here suggests to the right, is he's going to discover an entirely new ocean. It's the Pacific Ocean. And what Balboa recognizes is that this landmass that he had explored separates the Atlantic Ocean from the Pacific Ocean. So what he does is he claims the entire ocean dramatically for Spain. Does Spain control and own the Pacific Ocean? No. But ultimately, this is going to open up the door for more explorations westward, even further west than the land masses that and the islands that Spain had already claimed. So when we talk about Balboa, his big claim to fame is this last thing here. All right, he is the first European to see the Pacific Ocean. So sorry, I thought that was a red pen there. All right, he's the first European to see the Pacific Ocean. So for Balboa, that's the one big thing I would want you to remember when it comes to a quiz or a test, is that highlighted portion there. The next explorer or even conquistador that I would like to talk about and point out is kind of as a result of Balboa's exploration and a man by the name of Ferdinand Magellan. So you know, Ferdinand Magellan was actually born in Portugal, which ironically at the time was really the exploration capital of Europe at this time. And Magellan had made a number of voyages already to the Middle East and to India, sailing around the southern tip of Africa. And while in the Middle East, while in India and back in Portugal, Magellan recognized one thing. People in Europe were obsessed with purchasing spices from the Middle East. So that is why, in many ways, the age of exploration is kicked into another gear in the 1500s, because finding a quicker trade route to Asia to attain these spices like pepper and cinnamon and others, curry for that matter, not only for flavor but also as a food preservative. It would be the equivalent of today of countries trying to use and trade in the Middle East for oil. All right, we know how big the conversation of oil as a resource for power. All right, but spices were the it thing. So what happens in 1515 is Magellan goes to the king and queen of Portugal and he asks for a favor, seeing that he has been a loyal sailor and contributor to Portugal over the years. He wants to be funded for an exploration westward to see if he can help Portugal establish a quicker trade route to Asia to make money for Portugal because of the spice trade. And the king and queen say no, that they are invested, as we said, with Columbus setting south around the southern tip of Africa. So what Magellan does is he says, all right, fine, you're not going to fund me, then I'm going to denounce my allegiance to Portugal, and I'm going to find a country that is willing to fund me. So he winds up crossing the border from Portugal into Spain, Portugal's big rival, and lo and behold, Spain is willing to finance a voyage for Magellan. Now, the spin that he plays on it in Spain is this. Not only does he want to find a quicker trade route to Asia, but the way to do that is by finding a waterway that connects the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. All right. So that's a big deal. People in Europe didn't know if there was a river or a strait that did this. So Magellan is going to set out in 1519 with 5 ships and over just about 300 men to find a waterway, a water passage, a water route that connected the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. And Magellan and his crew spend nearly a year exploring the east coast of South America. When we talk about, though, why a year for an entire coastline is simply because Magellan and his crew didn't know anything about this continent, so to speak. For them, was there a waterway? So they got to go along the entire coast. Any inlet, anything that seems to be a river needs to be explored. Now, lo and behold, they will finally, a year later, find a strait. As we said, the Bering Strait, a narrow waterway that connects 2 larger bodies of water. As it turns out, this strait is located at the southern tip of South America. To this day, it is called the Strait of Magellan. When Magellan and his crew round that southern tip, now the question is, how big is the Pacific Ocean? And to many people in Europe, the Pacific Ocean was very large, but they didn't really know how big. Magellan's crew is going to really be the first group of Europeans that add a little light to this answer. Now, because the Pacific Ocean was so big, Magellan and his crew had to stop at a lot of islands along the way, specifically on their way to Asia. One of the islands that they wind up stopping in is the Philippines, which is really in the southeast part of what is today Asia. It is here in the Philippines where they are going to meet hostiles, so to speak, and a number of Magellan's crew is going to be killed when they step foot on this island, thinking that the people living there would have been a little bit more peaceful. They were not. This is where actually Magellan is unfortunately killed in 1521, and he is buried there to this day. The remaining survivors of the crew, one ship and 30 men or so, will leave the Philippines. And at this point, they're done exploring. They're not looking for spices. They just want to go home. They've been at sea for nearly 2 years. So it takes them just a little under a year to get all the way south of the Middle East, around the southern tip of Africa, and all the way back to Spain. So a voyage that left in 1519 with approximately 300 men and a captain like Magellan returns with only 1 ship and only 18 survivors. So why do we talk about Magellan? Magellan is an important explorer because of one thing. His crew was the first to circumnavigate the Earth. For people in Europe, they did not know how big the Earth was. Columbus, as we said, thought that the Earth was a lot smaller. However, the Earth surprisingly to Europeans, is a lot bigger because to them, the Pacific Ocean, the realization now is that the Pacific Ocean is a lot bigger. For Magellan and his crew, the realization is made that there is not an easy trade route to Asia sailing west, but there are plenty of land masses that are uninhabited by European countries, that are unclaimed by European countries, and now the idea that Magellan is able to present is huge opportunities for Spain to continue their conquest of these lands that they had started with Columbus. So unfortunately for Ferdinand Magellan, he's not one of those crew members, but nonetheless, we talk about him in the light because it was his first crew to circumnavigate, to go all the way around the earth. It would be like me circumnavigating the second floor of Kellenberg. If I start at 245, the way I do that to go all the way around the second floor is walk through the hallways until I come back to room 245. All right? The third conquistador that I would want to bring up to you guys today is a man by the name of Juan Ponce de Leon. He's an interesting historical figure because a lot of times people associate Juan Ponce de Leon as a Spanish conquistador who sought out to find this famed fountain of youth, which is kind of this rumor that originates in Europe, that it may have been in Asia centuries ago. But now, since it wasn't found in Asia, there's rumors that it might be here in the Americas. But the reality is there was no fountain of youth, and there's really no evidence that actually suggests that Juan Ponce de Leon was in search of this fountain of youth. As a Spanish conquistador, he was originally with Columbus on his second voyage in 1493. During that time, Columbus explored many different islands, including Puerto Rico, which is where Juan Ponce de Leon will wind up living, and ultimately becoming part of the government structure there as one of the key leaders. But like that word adventurer in defining a conquistador, soldier adventurer, Juan Ponce de Leon is not willing to just stay settled in Puerto Rico. Rumors of lands north of what is today the Caribbean leads him to a large landmass in 1513. Here, he was in search of gold. And for Juan Ponce de Leon, that is a big motivating factor as a conquistador, looking to become famous, but also rich. In the area's landmass that he explores, he winds up in an area that he calls in his journal La Florida, which happens to be translated to the flower, which for him was a huge testament to the areas in which he was exploring because of the lush flowers that were on this so-called island that he was exploring. Well, as it turns out, he wasn't on an island. As it turns out, he was on the continent of North America. And today we consider Juan Ponce de Leon the first Spaniard, and really European, to step foot in what is today the United States. Although he did this in 1513, it took 60 plus years for Spain to actually establish a settlement in this area of North America. It's not until 1585 when the Spanish will settle their first permanent settlement known as St. Augustine. But nonetheless, Juan Ponce de Leon, an important part of Spain, claiming even more land for themselves. So when you think about it, as of right now, we've talked about 3 conquistadors. Here's what I want you to know about them. Balboa, on a quiz or a test, know that he was the first European to see the Pacific Ocean. Magellan, he was the first, his crew was the first to circumnavigate the earth. Juan Ponce de Leon, he was the first Spaniard to step foot in what is today the United States. And be sure to be able to make those distinctions when we get to a quiz or test. The last person and last conquistador that I want to go over with you guys today is a man by the name of Hernando Cortez. And in many cases, Hernando Cortez is considered to be widely the most successful conquistador during this time period. And the reason for his success was simply because he was ambitious, he was motivated, and instead of exploring, he wanted to conquer. He wanted to conquer to become famous, he wanted to conquer to become wealthy and rich, and he wanted to conquer because he wanted to help spread Christianity, highly religiously motivated. So that goes back, obviously, to the 3 Gs. And when we talk about conquering, what better way to be considered the most famous of all conquistadors than to attempt to conquer what had been at that time the most successful civilization here in the Western Hemisphere, which was the Aztec Empire. In 1519, Cortez set out to conquer the Aztecs. And ironically, when making landfall in what is today Central America, Cortez encountered a number of native tribes. And through conversation, the realization became that these natives were willing to assist the Spanish in bringing them to the capital Aztec city of Tenochtitlan. Now, the reason as to why these natives were willing to turn on the Aztecs and support the Spanish was simply because of the Aztec rule of Central America during this time. They were brutal, conquering tribes, forcing them into slavery, but also, as we mentioned earlier this week, the Aztecs were widely known for human sacrifices. So basically, these natives are going to assist Cortez in bringing them to the island capital of what is known as Tenochtitlan. Now, a little bit of background about Tenochtitlan, ironically enough, was one of the most populous cities in the world during this time period. It was built on an island in the middle of Lake Texaco. Today that lake has been dried out, but nonetheless, it was widely considered to be one of the most successful cities in the world. Now, prior to Cortez arriving in Tenochtitlan, the Aztec Empire was going through a very difficult time period in which they were having droughts, all right? And without rainfall, their crops were being destroyed, and many, due to the fact that they were religious, many people believed that the gods had become angry at the Aztecs. So, as they were very religious in nature, what the Aztecs did in hoping to please the gods was, as we've mentioned again, performing human sacrifices, and they did this for weeks, day and day and day and day after day, night after night. And when Cortez arrives on the outskirts of the city of Tenochtitlan, the Aztecs feel and believe that their prayers have been answered, because off to the distance, a group of people that are in bright, shiny armor, they are on the backs of beasts, and the Aztecs believe that the gods have arrived to answer their prayers. The ironic thing is that it was the Spanish there to conquer them. So they were completely off with their assumptions, and they had never seen horses, they had never seen plated armor like the Spanish conquistadors would have had. Montezuma, who was the Aztec leader at the time, is going to be welcoming of the Spanish as they come into the city thinking that they were the gods and that their prayers have been answered. And what better way than to show appreciation for the arrival of the gods than to shower them with gifts? And the gifts were made of gold. And for Cortez, someone ambitious, someone who wants to conquer the Aztecs, now knows in the back of his mind that this empire, that this city, has gold. So almost instantly, Cortez, and I have here in the notes, their first meeting doesn't go as planned, Cortez is going to take Montezuma hostage, their leader. And he says, listen, I'm going to kill Montezuma unless I get all of the gold in this city. Now, this might be a good plan in theory, but let's go back to something I just said. Cortez has 500 men. The Aztec Empire, the capital city, was believed, Tenochtitlan, to be occupied with well over 200,000 Aztecs. 200,000 against 500. That's not going to go well for Cortez. So luckily for Cortez and his men, they have armor and they have guns and cannons, and they're able to escape the city with most of their men. But for Cortez, he knows that he needs to come back. Next time with more troops, with more supplies, more ships to conquer the Aztec Empire. Over a year later, Cortez will come back to Tenochtitlan, but he comes back to a very different city. While Cortez and the Spanish were gone, the Aztecs go through another difficult time period. Their people were dying, and no one understood as to why so many people were dying in large masses. The reason? The Spanish had brought disease into the capital city when Cortez had looked to occupy it the first time. During this time period, not only were people dying, but the Aztecs began to turn on each other. They turned on their leader, Montezuma. So Cortez returns to a very much weakened capital city of Tenochtitlan when he comes to conquer it a year later. Within a few weeks, the Aztec capital will fall. Within a few months, the Aztec Empire will be under complete control of the Spanish. For Cortez, he is considered, as I said, to be the most famous of all the conquistadors because the big number here. It is believed Cortez is believed to have taken over 100 tons of gold back to Spain as a result of conquering the Aztecs. That would be equivalent today of hundreds of billions of dollars. So Cortez is widely successful here in accomplishing his goal in conquering the Aztecs. The capital city of Tenochtitlan will be renamed Mexico City, which has its names and its origins tied to Spain. Today, the Lake Texaco, where Tenochtitlan was built and where Mexico City now renamed, has dried out, which is now the capital city of today, Mexico, and is considered to be one of the most populous cities today in all of Central America. So for Cortez, this is a huge success for him, which now begs the question, are there any other civilizations out there left to be conquered? And on Monday, we'll talk about the conquistador that will conquer the other major civilization, this time in South America, and certainly a lot easier when we talk about Francisco Pizarro conquering the Incan Empire. All right, so that's going to be it for today. All right, this is where I got up to in all of my other classes this morning. So at this time, I believe you guys should have about 10 minutes or so. I want you guys to work and finish your key terms that we started to work on in class, assignment 1.4a. If you have finished those, obviously, please work on your homework, assignment 1.4b. Both key terms and questions will be checked on Monday. Okay, so if you don't get a chance to finish your key terms now, obviously make sure that they are finished for Monday. And obviously your questions, if you didn't do them last night, gave you 4 nights to get those done. Those will be checked on Monday as well. All right. I won't be here after school today, so I wish you guys all the best of luck for those participating in homeroom day. May the best homeroom win, whether it be 6th grade or 7th grade. Enjoy your day, enjoy your weekend, and we'll catch up on Monday as we look to wrap up with Section 4 and talking about the Spanish Empire here in the New World. All right. Take care.